Welcome back to Cobblestone. We came running here because the King's Knights paid a visit, and we thought that they would probably have burned the town down. But this isn't a burned down town. Instead, it seems like everybody's forgotten us, and our girlfriend is 10 years younger than she used to be. What's going on? Well, what's going on is that you couldn't burn down the main character's village for the 100,000th time running without giving it some kind of twist. We came back to this village expecting it to be burned down, and that's because it always is. The starting village is always burned down in this kind of game. But instead, we find that it's thrown us a curveball. And what's going on? Did we travel back in time? Did the King's Knights hypnotize the city? Is this all just a delusion because we can't handle the truth? What is it? Well, it is a delusion. It's powered by your connection to the World Tree, apparently, because the World Tree glows. But in Japan, they have a much freer kind of cinema where they do frequently have a subjective camera where they'll show the world as someone sees it, rather than an objective camera like we're used to in the West. So this would be a little bit of less of a surprise for people in Japan who have seen that sort of thing frequently. But to people like us in America, this is a little bit unusual, and it probably threw a lot of people for a loop, and they were probably trying to find like a logical explanation for it. There is no logical explanation. The whole point is that it's an emotional beat. The reason it's here is to prevent the player from simply having another burned down village and just going the same exact beat in the exact same way. I will note that this cutscene is a little bit strange because it gives the main character a voice. And that was enough to actually make me go, wait, is this actually something else? Because the main character doesn't have a voice. Why are we giving the main character voiced lines? What's going on? Is this actually some kind of weird time travel replacement gimmick? Because I thought it was just a delusion, but now the main character's doing things that they wouldn't do. But it turns out they just gave the main character lines for no reason. Great.
Well, we can.
So as a magical delusion, Chalky stands in for the part of our psyche, or the part of our history, that wants us to move forward, and therefore he is going to push us to move on and guide us towards the future.
It's you, isn't it?
This is a really pretty interesting way to do it, because until now, what they've done is every single time they've ever said anything, they've said it so a 10-year-old could understand. And Chalky isn't going, I'm a delusion of your past, but I'm the part of your delusion that's here to make you move forward with your life. They don't bother explaining it. They're happy to just leave the kids confused because it's a fantasy story and you don't have to explain everything, especially not something that they will understand if they play it again when they're 14 or 20.
I knew it. But you don't look too happy, my lad. I see. So, you're from a future where I'm no longer around, and King Carnelian went and threw you in the dungeon? If I'd known how things were going to turn out... But you don't have time to be listening to an old man's regrets. If you head east out of the... Got that? The three-sided rock at Cobblestone Fall. Oh, but what a fine figure of a man you've become. You be good now, lad.
And now, if you're playing through yourself, this is the moment where you realize that whatever the thing was, whether it was a delusion or a magic spell or time travel, it's over now. And the village is gone. The village is now really gone. It's not that the king destroyed it while you were missing, it's that the king destroyed it while you were missing, and now, even though you've seen it, you're going to have to see it destroyed. This is an interesting approach. What it's done is it's actually radically amped up the damage of seeing this burned down village, because you're not, as the player, you went back expecting to see the village burn down. You walk into the village and you're like, it's gonna be burned down, and it's gonna be like, oh no, my village. But by throwing you a curveball, what they've allowed you to do is re-experience the player's connection, the main character's connection to the village. Because of that, you will now feel the devastation much more powerfully, and it can just be like, it was here and now it's gone. They can compress that time. So sure, the village was destroyed a week ago, but to the player who saw the village functioning just a second ago, saw a bucolic village just a second ago, suddenly revealing it as destroyed will be a smack in the face, rather than, as expected, it's going to be punched way, way up. And I think that originally what happened was they had reverted the village here. And as you walked up the stairs, the village was just gone. So you would come up here and it would just be gone. But they decided that that wasn't going to work. And I think they may have done this to soften the blow, because they raised that tension up really, really strong. They brought the village to the forefront of the player's mind. Rather than being a distant memory from 10 hours earlier in the game, they'll have remembered the village as a bucolic, wonderful village just a couple of seconds ago, and then showing it just gone probably would have made some of the children cry. It's a very powerful idea, probably too powerful for a game and aimed at 10-year-olds. The pacing was probably too sharp. Of course, I'm just guessing. It may be that this was their first idea and they just went with it, but their first idea was this particular approach really softens that blow. And it does that by giving you a final set of scenes which ruins that really, really sharp pacing and introduces an incredibly soft glow at the last second. This scene here is going to make you have all the warm, fuzzy feelings rather than the desolate, destroyed feelings.
Play anytime you like. It's ages till I gotta go home. What should we play now?
Well, we could play, hide and seek.
Are you okay? I lost you for a minute there. Not surprising, I guess.
In addition to showing you that last heartfelt scene, they then are very careful to reintroduce you to the present with a friend that can care for you and soften the blow and make sure you don't feel too alone. They've taken all of the edge out of that really, really brutal edge that they put in. And it was an interesting thing to see, and I'm not sure I liked it. I think I would have liked it better if, when you came up the stairs, this is what you saw. Or we're going to talk about that. I don't actually want you to have seen that.
And just because you grew up here? What kind of animals are they?
So now that you've gone through what apparently was a very convoluted cutscene, they're going to spend some time telling you the main points via your blue-haired buddy. This is something they do a lot. They always have a summary at the end of every major cutscene where your buddy says, well, you know what you just saw? Let me read it back to you, because I know that you won't remember that shit since you're 10. And that's exactly what's going on here.
Jasper and his goons must have ridden straight here after you got thrown in the dungeon. Hey, just now, when you zoned out, the Wow. So you went back in time and must have been the root here. It must have the power to show you the past. Well, if what your granddad told you was right, where did you say it was? East of the village?
Notice how the camera is now with Eric rather than you. That's another good way to establish distance and soften it a little bit, while still establishing that the character feels really terrible. Alright, and so now we are in the village as it currently stands. Now I've already talked about the setup where the reason why they did it the way they did it. They didn't want you to just come back to a ruined village because you hadn't seen the village in 10 hours. You don't really have any strong feelings left for it. So by showing you the village in a bucolic state, they could then wreck it and have it have a much stronger impact. In addition, they can also show you that the tree has some powers over time, the world tree. And that's probably going to come up later. I can't imagine that they would have introduced time travel only to abandon it. But who knows, because less than time travel, that was more like just a delusion, a break. And that's something that's much more common in Japanese cinema than American cinema, showing you subjective cameras. Still, in the end, what we've returned to is this destroyed version of Cobblestone, and I want to talk about the level design of the destroyed Cobblestone a little bit, so that, we can finish this video off right with some talk about blowing stuff up. So, this is a terrible village. This is not nearly good enough for the emotional impact it needs to have. So let's talk about what's wrong with them having burned down the village like this. Now, the first thing is all of these burned down houses are actually pretty good. I think that having these smashed houses probably took them a lot of effort. They had to make variants of the village that were burned down, and all their houses needed to be smashed, and I'm sure that that took them a fair amount of effort. But that's not the only thing that happens when you burn a village down. The idea that they just came by and somehow magically knocked down all of the stone walls, like this, and that was it? That's so bizarre. Like, okay, they knocked down the stone walls, they knocked down this area, but why are these trees intact? Why didn't they burn down the trees? Why is the grass intact? Did none of the fires actually spread from the house to the grass that's 2 feet from the house? Why isn't there any damage to the ground? The stamping footsteps of knights and horses with heavy hooves should have trampled this grass. And basically what I wanted to make sure that you understand is when you are building a devastated area, this is where you start, but it's not what you need to finish with. You have to show that the buildings have been destroyed, but it's almost more important to show that the landscape has been damaged. Because this is still a very bucolic landscape, it's just that now it looks more like ruins and less like a city. So, it would have been a lot more powerful to me if we had seen actual leftovers of the knights. The hoof marks in the ground, the burn marks on the grass. That sort of thing would have felt more powerful to me. Also, this isn't how stone houses burn down. So, just so you realize it, if you've ever been to a place where they have old stone buildings, they often end up looking like this. These are ruins. This is what this is. This is how stone walls fall down over decades. It's not how stone walls fall down immediately. So if you burn down a stone house, this isn't what you see. What you see is an almost completely intact stone set of walls blackened by soot, and only the top areas will have collapsed. Now, if the roof collapses in just the right way, it can knock over walls and do something similar to this, but it will still be mostly blackened, charred space with leftover fires. It won't be nice, clean brick walls that just happen to have been punched in. I can't imagine what happened to do this. These walls look like they are 200 years old, or 50 years old at least, instead of looking like they got burned in. So I can't buy this as a burned down village, and I think that that's a major shame, because after the emotional impact of seeing your village live and well and then having that taken from you, that would have been much more powerful if the village actually felt like it had been destroyed instead of feeling like it had just fallen over. But that would have taken a lot of work, and I can see why they didn't do it. All of this stuff in this game that I complain about usually boils down to that would have been work, and they didn't have the time or the budget. Now that said, I'm not sure how much of Dragon Quest XI I'm going to play. I very rarely finish long games these days, and there are other games that I would like to play. So if you think that Dragon Quest XI is something that I should stick with, let me know. But to be frank, they may have gotten their best level design out of the way already, because recently most of their levels have been pretty haphazard. And their plot points have been strong, but they usually are self-sabotaged. I'm curious as to what's going on, but I'm not so curious that I'm going to keep coming here with lukewarm takes every day for the next 6 months while I try and beat the game. So, let me know what you think, and that's it for today.